For the perspective of a superintendent, it is my pleasure to introduce Kevin L. Walston, a proven educational leader with experience bringing people together to achieve a shared vision. Appointed superintendent of Danbury Public School District in August 2021, he's responsible for the education of more than, now listen to this, 12,000 students in 13 elementary schools, 3 middle schools, 1 comprehensive high school, 1 alternative high school, 1 alternative 6 through 12 school, 2 pre-kindergarten programs, and an adult education program that serves the Danbury region. Wow, that is a big job, Kevin. Mr. Walston's career in education began over 22 years ago, previously serving as the district's assistant superintendent since July of 2018. He served in urban school districts in the state of Connecticut for 12 years, including as a turnaround principal and director of schools. Prior to coming to Connecticut, Mr. Walston taught in the New York City public school system as a social studies teacher and assistant principal. Mr. Walston earned his Bachelor of Arts degree in Black Studies from the City University of New York in New York City, and later earned a master's degree in administration and supervision from the College of New Rochelle, and his professional diploma in school district administration also from the College of New Rochelle. With equity and access as his guiding principle, Mr. Walston is committed to ensuring that all students receive a high quality education in partnership with the community and families. Mr. Walston knows how to leverage this work, including utilizing a powerful and comprehensive Board of Education policy. Mr. Walston is also the father of 2 beautiful children, Noah C. Walston and Kayla Mae Walston, who recently graduated from Florida State University. Welcome, Superintendent Walston.
Mr. Hopkins, thank you so much for that great introduction. I really appreciate the enthusiasm. And also just want to also give thanks to the students who presented prior to me. And I'd love for them to know that we will certainly be considering their thoughts as part of our ongoing planning here in Danbury Public Schools. Thank you for really excited to be a part of this morning. So I have a question, and the question that was presented to me is to talk about equity here in our district, and just in terms of our perspective, how we're implementing equity here in the district. And give me 1 second and see if I can't share my screen. And I will start here. And so again, my name is Kevin Walston, recently appointed Superintendent of Schools in Danbury in August of 2021. Prior, as Troy had mentioned, I was Assistant Superintendent in the district for 3 years prior. I want to open with talking about the importance of diversity, equity, and inclusion in a leadership vision. Here in the district, dating back almost 4 years now, 5 or 6 years now, sorry, the district prior to my arrival had applied for a grant through Nellie Mae to uncover some of the obstacles that were stopping students of color from realizing the same student outcome success as their peers. And so we began to interview families, teachers, students, administrators across the district, and was able to look at that data to begin to think about how the district can improve outcomes for kids across the system. This work during the 18 and 19 school year, Dr. Sal, our previous superintendent, had charged my office and a couple of other offices with revisiting our district plan and revisiting that plan so that it could be operationalized in a way so it could be meaningful for teacher practice, for leadership, administrative leadership moves across the district. And as part of our process, we decided it was best to fold in our DEI work on the heels of our Nellie Mae study, fold in our DEI work with our strategic plan. And during the entire time, my plan was to make sure DEI lived in our strategic plan, to make sure it was embedded in our work. And so prior to the pandemic in March 2020, we were looking for actual approval on our strategic plan. And the pandemic, well, it kind of hurt that planning and trying to get this in front of the board. And so we decided to pause on asking the board to take action on the plan, and decided it was best to revisit the district strategic plan on the heels of the pandemic. And we felt strongly that we are there now. And so what you're going to find in these next few slides is an overview and what we see as the components of a leadership vision, what I see as the components of a leadership vision by incorporating DEI in every aspect of our strategic plan. And so in December of 2019, as part of this journey, it was important for us to make sure that the Board of Education and was also very acceptant and was supportive of our work toward diversity, equity, and inclusion in Danbury Public Schools. And through policy is how the board supported this movement. And so we had a board-approved prop policy in December of 2019. And from that policy, we pulled out some language, which now serves as an excerpt for a district equity statement, which I will share with you shortly. The next bullet talks about developing a vision and mission. These two vision and mission statements make it very clear our passion and our vision to make sure we are addressing the needs of all students in Danbury Public Schools. Last but not least, establish priorities into our district strategic plan that includes diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so here you will see, as I had mentioned previously, a commitment to equity and excellence. Danbury Public Schools, we demonstrated this by committing to our equity and diversity policy in 2019. And then as part of our strategic planning process, we agreed on one simple statement, and that is Danbury Public Schools aspires to advance all learners to their highest potential. And in all of our correspondence that we send out, all is emphasized in our language. My parents have used that same language with me when talking about meeting the needs of their own kids. And this language, this line is really, I think, our entire school community has adopted this vision as their own to make sure that in Danbury, when we say all, we mean all. And so to help operationalize the vision, we have a mission statement that we feel strongly in partnership with families and community. This is what makes it happen. And we provide transformational learning experiences for our students, and those learning experiences in our eyes also is for our staff as well. And then here's the equity statement that I referred to earlier, but it speaks to our commitment to engaging in practices that meet the needs of all students. And we do this by opening our doors and welcoming families in partnership, partnering with the community to help realize great student outcomes here in Danbury. And again, this is the time we feel like on the other side of the pandemic, this is the time to start this work. And so the guiding principles for our strategic plan you will find here. And we have 5 guiding principles, one on teaching and learning. Obviously, this is the more critical one for us as a community. Talent acquisition in terms of how we go out and recruit. And when speaking to some of the students, and I'm hearing their responses, I couldn't help but think about some of the priorities and guiding principles that we've identified. We're talking about talent acquisition, recruiting and employing and retaining culturally competent workforce, particularly one that reflects the diversity of our community, which is very diverse. School culture, promoting a welcome and nurturing school culture focused on developing meaningful relationships. We endeavor to do this in a variety of ways, whether it's in person, whether it's virtually. The district has just recently invested in programs to try to promote and encourage our families to have have a better, even more meaningful connections to our teachers and our principals. And this is in the form of Parent Square, for those of you who might be familiar with some of these platforms, a new website that is underway and should be ready by July 1st. So we're very excited about these things. Professional capacity, develop effective leaders and teachers through relevant job-embedded PD, professional learning. Again, the district has invested in this as well. We're placing a specific and particular focus on principal development, and then as part of our theory of action, and recognizing and acknowledging how important the instructional core is. Our principals and our teachers are the folks who we need to make sure are most supported in this process. And so we will make sure that our strategic plan is focused on those two classifications of staff to make sure we can get the most out of our students. And last but not least, operations, fiscal responsibility, and advocacy. And this is about resource allocation, and make sure and find formulas to support schools based on need and not just simply based on numbers. And here are the 6 priorities of our district vision: teaching and learning, staff development, talent acquisition, school climate, meaningful collaboration, and resource allocation. And a little bit about the first one. And so teaching and learning, we will provide equitable learning environments and experiences that are rigorous, inclusive, and culturally responsive, that prepare learners for post-secondary success. And I mentioned earlier, we had started work on the strategic plan prior to the pandemic and paused during the pandemic, again, feeling that it was more appropriate to revisit the plan on the other side of the pandemic. But even prior to full approval by the board, we had made moves in this direction to make sure we are providing rigorous, inclusive, and culturally responsive learning environments for our students. One of our biggest investments prior to the pandemic was working with NYU Metro Center. In that work, we adopted a rubric in how, well, one, our teaching and learning and curriculum office, all of our administrators received initial training from New York NYU Metro. As part of that training, it was shared with us kind of our responsibility to make sure we're providing a culturally responsive curriculum. And one of our first charges for our curriculum department was to revisit the ordering of textbooks, specifically books that our kids read in grades 1 through 5. And so if you walk in our elementary classrooms right now and look on classroom libraries, we have 60+% of our student population who identify as Latinx and or Portuguese. And the books in our classrooms in those libraries now look like our students. And so whether they're Black, Brown, Asian, those books in our classrooms look like our students. And that is because our curriculum office went through an exercise and have adopted a rubric that helps to guide those purchases moving forward, as well as a similar rubric is in place to guide experiences in our curriculum. And so you are seeing the high level goal for each strategy, but under each strategy are action steps. Under each goal are additional strategies and action steps to help us realize this goal. What I just shared with you is one of our examples. Staff development. We would develop and enhance the skills of our educators and competencies of all district staff through a lens of cultural responsiveness to reach the needs of our diverse learners. And prior to the pandemic, the district, we invested considerable time in restorative practices. Again, one of the words that I heard one of our students mention prior to my presentation. In addition to the restorative practice work, we had also began to work through New York NYU Metro. We worked on bias training as well, and frankly had the success just in terms of beginning to change hearts and minds with our administrative staff. The restorative work started with our administrators as well, and then we got deeper into the system in which we asked and required the principals to share several models with their staff during the 1920 school year. And we're very proud of them and our staff engaging in this work. talent acquisition, and this one is a big one for us. I would say that we really need to be a lot more intentional about this work and the way we go out to recruit. And that recruitment also requires this is not only looking at how we recruit and doing this more intentionally, but also making sure and standardizing questions for any potential staff member in this district, making sure we're asking questions that help to elicit whether or not the people who we are hiring embrace diversity the way we do, because it is very important for us here in Danbury Public Schools. And so it's important that we employ and retain culturally responsive workforce because we truly embrace the diversity in this community. The school climate, this one is another important one for us. We just had a training with our principals and family liaisons over the last 2 weeks. And certainly will be one of the many action steps under school climate to make sure it's safe, number one, but two, make sure our families and make sure our students feel safe. And then last but not least, make sure our staff feel safe and safe coming to school every day. And so we just invested in a welcoming schools protocol district-wide. Every single school was represented at the meeting, and very proud of the principals and their respective leadership teams. And we will be inviting, I believe, led by CREC, inviting CREC into our schools through a welcoming committee team, getting the feedback to make sure that our families feel welcomed, that our students feel welcome, that our staff feel welcome, and getting feedback so that we can make the adjustments necessary to make sure our community does indeed feel welcome. Our doors have been reopened since masks have been optional in district, but we fully anticipate in the fall that we'll have even more families coming back to schools, and we want to make sure our doors are welcomed all schools are welcome for everyone. Meaningful collaboration, and this has been another very important one for us. We will partner with families, communities, and the public and private sectors to foster vested interest in schools and collectively create opportunities for deeper engagement. And of course, all of our goals are about improving student outcomes. But this one's important to us because we feel strongly that during the pandemic, we were able to connect with families in ways we were not able to prior to the pandemic. We began to leverage our ability to have Zoom meetings and remote meetings, not terribly different the way we're doing right now. We were able to engage more families during the pandemic, and we intend to capitalize on that momentum. And so whether it's through our recent investments in Parent Square, inviting more families in through our website, or making sure that our principals and our teachers have multiple ways to engage families, and not just the expectation that families can make it in the building for a meeting. And so our principals and our teachers are slowly getting all of the resources they're going to need to be able to engage our families. Parent Square, unfortunately, in our district hasn't been fully implemented yet, but in time will be. We're seeing that as a significant leverage point moving forward. And then, of course, we have Zoom and Google Meets, which a lot of our parents have certainly invested in. And so the hybrid way of engaging our families has been really beneficial, specifically with our parents. But we're hoping to do this in a more meaningful way as we move forward. And last but not least, we've been working really hard, particularly during the grants provided by the federal government, the American Relief Grants. We've been working really hard to establish transparency in our budgeting process, making sure we've gotten in front of families, making sure we've gotten feedback from our buildings. And I mean, we're nowhere near perfect in this regard, but we have every intention of making sure we've established a transparent and coherent budget process. And most importantly, to make sure that we're allocating buildings in an equitable fashion to make sure our buildings get what they need to help support staff to get the best possible outcomes from students. And so this is what we're calling our coherence wheel. And so on the outer core, you will see the 6 strategies that we have identified to help move this district forward. With that is our strategic plan in the Board of Education. And of course, they supervise me through the strategic plan. Our Inquire, Act, and Prepare is what we call here our data-wise process. And this is to continue to get feedback regarding student outcomes so that we can react and support teachers and school leaders. But ultimately, it's this purple, this instructional core that's at the center of our attention. And we intend to do everything in this plan to make sure that core is supported in our work moving forward.